The 2026 World Cup arrived with more hype than almost any tournament in history. 3 host nations, 48 teams, a full month of football on a scale the world had never tried before. FIFA billed it as historic. The host called it a golden moment. For one 34-year-old referee from Mogadishu, it was supposed to be the peak of a career built from nothing. His name is Omar Artan. Here's what actually happened to him. He wasn't sent home for a bad call. He wasn't disciplined for misconduct. He didn't fail a fitness test, and he hadn't clashed with anyone at FIFA. Omar Artan was simply refused entry into the United States. The country hosting most of the tournament's matches turned away one of FIFA's own hand-picked officials at the airport. After 11 hours of questioning in Miami, he was put back on a plane. His World Cup ended before it started. And then something unexpected happened. While FIFA largely let the story go with a brief statement, European football moved the opposite way. From Mogadishu to the world stage, Artan's rise wasn't an easy one. Somalia has spent decades rebuilding after civil war, and its football infrastructure has faced every setback imaginable. Artan pushed through anyway. He joined FIFA's list of officials in 2018 and climbed steadily through continental competitions. By January 2024, he became the first Somali referee to take charge of a match at the Africa Cup of Nations, officiating a Group E fixture between Tunisia and Namibia. A year later, the Confederation of African Football named him the continent's top male referee, the highest individual honor available to an African official. FIFA took notice. When a list of 52 referees for the 2026 World Cup was published 2 months before kickoff, Artan's name was on it. He was set to be the first Somali referee and one of the few African officials ever to work a men's World Cup. So when he flew from Istanbul to Miami in early June, he wasn't just making a work trip. He was stepping into the moment his entire career had been pointed toward. He carried a valid visa, his FIFA paperwork, and photos documenting his refereeing career, everything he could think to bring to prove who he was. None of it mattered. 11 hours in Miami border officials held Artan at Miami International Airport for 11 hours. He later told the New York Times that agents pressed him on Somali politics and asked about the militant group Al-Shabaab. He showed his FIFA credentials and laid out his career. It didn't change the outcome. He was placed in a holding cell and put on the next flight back to Istanbul. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed the removal, citing vetting concerns that made him inadmissible. A.U.S. official later told CBS News the decision rested on intelligence linking him to suspected terrorist organizations. Artan, for his part, said no one gave him a straight answer at the airport. His own read on it was blunt. He believed officials simply had a problem with his country. Somalia sits among roughly 40 nations now facing tightened U.S. travel restrictions. What makes the case stranger is that Artan's visa had already been approved before he ever boarded the plane. The refusal came at the border, after the visa process had already cleared him. FIFA confirmed Artan would be unable to work the tournament, adding a line that's since been picked apart repeatedly, that, as with past events, a host government alone decides who is allowed into its country. Translation: FIFA's hands are tied. UEFA saw it differently. UEFA's answer, just hours before the World Cup kicked off, UEFA President Alexander Ceferin made an announcement that rippled through the sport. Working with the Confederation of African Football, UEFA appointed Artan to referee the 2026 UEFA Super Cup final, the preseason clash between the Champions League and Europa League winners. This year, Paris Saint-Germain against Aston Villa, set for August 12th in Salzburg. With it, Artan becomes the first African referee ever to take charge of a major UEFA final. Ceferin didn't mince words, calling Artan an already accomplished young official who'd proven himself at the top of African football and framing the appointment as a statement of respect. CAF President Patrice Motsepe was just as direct, saying Artan had made Somalia and the whole African continent proud, and calling the Super Cup posting a landmark moment for African officiating. The contrast is stark. The body that appointed Artan in the first place watched him get turned back and shrugged it off as a matter for the host government. A continental body, under no obligation to act at all, stepped in and handed him one of European football's marquee assignments. To be fair to FIFA, it's not entirely toothless reasoning. FIFA genuinely doesn't control any country's border policy, and it can't overrule a customs decision. FIFA President Gianni Infantino, pressed on the matter, reportedly waved off critics and told them to relax, a response that didn't land well. But the underlying point, that FIFA can't force a sovereign nation to let someone in, holds some truth. Not an isolated case. Artan's story drew the most attention, but it wasn't unique. When Iraq's national team landed at Chicago O'Hare on June 5th, star forward Ayman Hussein was held for 7 hours and questioned, with his phone reportedly searched. The team's photographer, Talal Salah, was detained for over 10 hours before being denied entry outright. A senior advisor to Somalia's Ministry of Youth and Sports called Artan's exclusion a blow to football's ideals of fairness and merit. Across several national teams, similar friction at the border has become a running theme of the tournament's build-up. Then there's Iran. Qualified and scheduled to play its group matches on U.S. soil, Iran's Football Federation, led by Mehdi Taj, signaled it would boycott American venues without pulling out of the tournament altogether, leaving FIFA to weigh whether to shift Iran's fixtures to Mexico, with no clean way to resolve the standoff. Add to that the presence of ICE agents at World Cup venues, officially described as a security measure, but one that still falls under immigration enforcement. Workers at stadiums, including SoFi Stadium, voted to strike over safety concerns for themselves and their families, and more than 120 immigrant rights organizations issued travel advisories to fans, players, and press heading to the tournament. Ticket prices added their own controversy, with resale prices for the final reportedly climbing close to $33,000, prompting a public warning from Attorney General against price gouging. Meanwhile, India entered June without a confirmed broadcast deal after FIFA's reported $100 million asking price collapsed talks with major streaming platforms, leaving a huge chunk of the world's football audience without an official way to watch. Heat became its own issue too. Researchers had flagged dangerous temperatures in several U.S. host cities well before kickoff. FIFA's response was mandatory 3-minute hydration breaks each half, though players, some of whom signed a joint open letter, pushed for stronger heat protocols and raised concerns about the environmental toll of shuttling a 48-team field across an entire continent. None of these issues alone defines the tournament. Together, they sketch a World Cup that spent as much time managing controversy as celebrating football. What it means going forward, Artan's case stands out, because nothing quite like it has happened before at a World Cup. A referee appointed by FIFA, carrying valid documents, still turned away at the border. It raises uncomfortable questions FIFA can't easily wave off. If it can't guarantee its own appointed officials will actually make it onto the pitch, what does that say about the independence of the officiating system it runs? And what should a fan from Somalia, Iraq, or Iran expect when they try to travel to watch a match? UEFA's move has been widely praised for doing several things at once: standing behind an official treated unfairly, making history by naming the first African referee to a major UEFA final, and proving there's more than one way for a governing body to respond when this happens. Artan himself has handled the fallout with striking grace. He returned to a hero's welcome in Mogadishu, crowds, flowers from officials, fans wrapping him in Somalia's flag, hoisted on shoulders in a stadium packed not for a match but for him. His own words afterward were simple. What happened was fate. He was grateful for FIFA's support, and despite everything, he remained upbeat and focused on what came next in his career. The tournament itself rolls on. The matches, ultimately, will be what people remember most. But the questions Artan's case raised aren't going away, about how FIFA protects the officials it appoints, whether its agreements with host nations need teeth, and how future hosting bids will be judged against situations exactly like this one. In August, Artan will walk out in Salzburg for the Super Cup final. Not the World Cup he trained a lifetime for, but major stage nonetheless, and one he'll take as the first African referee to stand there. That much no one could take back. The bigger question is whether football's governing bodies actually learn something from this, or whether it becomes another footnote in a tournament that had no shortage of them.